But of course it doesn't follow from that that some third claim is rational. It doesn't follow from the fact that we can't grasp the notion of a universe as it has existed from infinity, and that we can't grasp and understand the notion of a universe that came into being at some point. It doesn't follow from that it's any more rational to believe in the existence of a divine creator who somehow explains this. Indeed, the problem is, of course, that if you believe in the existence of a divine creator, you have exactly the same problem. You have exactly the same dilemma. Has this divine creator existed for an infinite duration of time? That is irrational for exactly the reason that Hassan explained. Again, it requires us to suppose that we're at the end of an infinite series, and that's something that we simply can't grasp as intelligible. Are we therefore to suppose that this creator came into existence out of nothing at some point in time? Again, that seems equally incomprehensible for exactly the same reason. So the key point then is, from the fact that those first two statements seem to be incomprehensible, it doesn't follow from that a third belief is any more comprehensible or any more rational. I don't want to get too philosophical here, but what we're coming up against here is what the philosopher Immanuel Kant identified as the limits of human understanding. Once we start talking about space and time as being either finite or infinite, we seem to be landed in contradiction. And there seems no way in which human understanding can get out of that contradiction. And that, though that may seem an uncomfortable position to be in, it doesn't follow that it's any more satisfactory or any more comprehensible to make the kind of move that Hassan made. I want to link this back, in conclusion, to what he was saying about the notion of rationality, and how the notion of rationality needs to be tied to sensation and to the reality that we experience. Because this was actually Kant's point when he talked about this dilemma of the finite and the infinite. Our notions of space and time are ones that we can make sense of and operate with only when they're applied to the world of our experience and the world of sensation. We know what it is for one thing to be followed by another in time. We know what it is for one thing to be next to something else in space. And we can make sense of the notions of the finite and the infinite in space and time when they're applied to our experience and our sensations and our idea of reality. And so really the conclusion that I want to come to is the one that it seemed to me that actually Hassan came to at the end. All that we can do is think about reality as we experience it within this universe. To go beyond that and to try to make sense of something outside this universe that explains it is to go beyond the limits of human understanding altogether. Thank you.
Professor Richard Norman has come up with his rebuttal, and he's partially agreed with Hassan's presentation, but he has disagreed on the first two statements that Hassan Chaudhry tried to prove. Here is now going to be an opportunity provided to Hassan Chaudhry to actually come and rebut the first presentation and maybe make some points on the rebuttal itself. Hassan Chaudhry.
Okay, Richard said that infinity is hard to grasp, it is incomprehensible. Well, let me humbly put forward a way of understanding infinity. Let's just call it endless. This means that the universe hasn't existed for an endless amount of time. That's all we're saying when there's no infinity. Why? Because if it was endless, we would be at the end of an endless chain. We would be at the end of infinity. Can you be at the end of infinity? No. Can infinity end? Can endless end? No. So that's not hard to grasp. Infinity is not hard to grasp. We're not at the end of it. So, if you are not at the end of an infinite chain, you're at the end of a chain that is finite. You're at the end of a chain that has a beginning. Something that has a beginning and didn't create itself. Your reality sensation, remember information. Remember we said that was rational. So we're going to use the information that we know. something that had a beginning and didn't create itself. Tell me what your information says. Your information says something made it. Your sense tells you something made it. Something that had a beginning and didn't make itself. Did something make it? That's all we're saying. To be using crude examples here, think about a meal. Think about a meal right in front of you. Somebody made that meal. You don't think, well, it just got here. No, at no point do you use the irrational part of your mind and think, I'm just going to ignore all the information that I hold. And I'm just going to think, well, you know what? Maybe I'm going to ignore my information. Because you know what happens if you ignore your information? You turn into a zombie. So let me give you some examples of what happens when you ignore the information that you hold. You need to go to the toilet. You walk towards two doors and there's a symbol on them. And you're like, my information is telling me that's the men's, but I'm going to ignore it. No. I'm going to walk in and, oh look, there's a seat. Yeah? There's some metal thing that moves. I'm going to ignore the information that I'm holding. Maybe it's not the flush. Maybe when I'm walking back to my seat, the earth will swallow me up. I'm going to ignore all the information that I have. Maybe they're coming to get me. That's the point, that you turn into someone who's paranoid, delusional, and you will be sectioned. The whole point of ignoring the information that you hold is you become irrational. Irrational, insane, mad, thesaurus, check it. Therefore, we have to use the information that we hold. Something that had a beginning and didn't make itself, something caused it. Not difficult. Now, also Richard kindly said that he agreed with the first part of my presentation. He said he agreed with the rationality. Remember, reality, sensation, information. That was what I was saying. That's what it means to be rational. But then Richard, even though he agreed with reality, sensation, information, asked questions like, has the creator existed for infinity? I'm afraid there's no information there. In fact, there's no sensation there either. It's not rational. Has the creator come into existence? We can't think about what's outside of this reality. Do you know why? Because you can't sense it, you have no information. It becomes irrational. It becomes like talking about Flub the ghost. And how many eyes he has? 3. You can't think about what's outside this reality. It's irrational. All you know is what's in front of you. And you can use that to come to a conclusion of something. And we do it all the time. A mechanic says, well, looks like it's going to be a few days' work. Why is he saying that? You know, I'm looking at the wear and tear of what's going on. I think you've had a few knocks. I think you've had a crash. The doctor, he thinks, you know, I think somebody smacked you over the head. Why is he doing this? Because he can look at the reality and come to conclusions about something. He doesn't need to know the colors of the eye of the man who hit you, but he knew you were hit. You can diagnose something very easily. That's why I said to you about the dead body, the knife, and the murder detective saying, I think there was a murder. You can come to those conclusions. It's rational. And I'll end there.
Thank you very much, Hassan Chaudhry, for your final rebuttal. This is the part of the debate now where we open the floor up for question and answers and comments from the audience. Before we start, I would like to just set a few house rules for the question and answer. I mean, we have got 2 very distinguished guests down, so please, is it possible you could keep your comments to the point, very short, very concise, and address each speaker. No heckling or jeering from the crowd, please. And it seems that in every debate, a member of the audience decides to become a special guest appearance and deliver the speech. So is it possible that you could keep your comments very sharp, please, and get to the point? So, without further, what the format will be is that we'll take around 2 or 3 questions, and we'll pose it to the panel. Each panelist will have approximately 3 to 4 minutes to answer each question, and they can answer it from the current place that they're at, no need to come to the podium. So without further ado, I would like to open up the floor. Please raise your hands if you want to ask a question. Guy with the grey-ish jacket.
My question was first to just to clarify your view. With Hassan's argument with the three-step argument that he made, right now I'm not completely sure where it is that you. I understand that you accept that we should think rationally, and then there was the next point that there is no such thing as an unlimited thing at the point. Do you still have a problem with that?
What with the claim that we find incomprehensible the notion of something existing for an infinite time.
Yeah. So I mean, do you believe that there's something that do you think that there's something that is?
Well, I
there's something that is unlimited.
I think
is it okay if I respond straight?
I think we'll take the question. I think one of the question is basically after Hassan's presentation, he presented that there must be an infinite creator who's not basically bound by the reality that we are bound by. So I think that's the question. Is there a problem with that, or the argument?
You finish what you want to say, and
I mean, my question is more just to clarify the view. Then I'll try and come back.
Oh, all right. May I respond initially?
I think we'll take 2 questions, then we'll answer. I mean, since we've down
the trouble is this chap doesn't know what his question is until he knows what I think.
Fair enough.
Excuse me. I just want to
find one second. Hold on. There has to be some kind of order to the question and answer.
Very quickly. I mean, my response to Hassan was move 1 okay, move 2 okay. It doesn't follow from that move 3 is okay. Because one thing is irrational and then something else is irrational. It doesn't follow that something else again is rational. You wanted to raise a question?
Yeah. So what I mean, why? I mean, okay. So why is it not okay for there to be an unlimited creator? Then, if we can agree that everything in reality that we can sense, because that's the first point he made, is limited. And we cannot identify anything which is unlimited. So therefore, the result of all of that, because all things are limited, is that there must be something which is outside of all of that, which.
But that doesn't follow.
Sorry?
It doesn't follow that there's anything outside of that, because what my point was, I'm sorry, it's that the move to there being something outside of reality is subject to exactly the same paradox, the same dilemma. But either it's something that must have been self-creating, or it's something that has existed endlessly. So you've got exactly the same problem that Hassan started with. That was my position.
Hassan Chaudhry would like to respond to that.
Okay, just very quickly. Richard said that whatever would have created this reality is subject to the paradox of either being self-created or have existed endlessly. But the second one is a problem because we have no information that tells us that time exists outside of this reality. Nothing. We know time exists in this reality, but we can't say the word endless applies outside. And on the first point of self-creation, we know creation exists in this reality. We have no understanding of whether creation exists outside of this reality. We have no information. That discussion is irrational. All we know is that this reality was caused. This reality is limited, dependent, created. We don't have information yet. Maybe that's another debate. But this reality is caused.
Next question from the blue white jumper.
I just wanted to follow on from the previous comment, basically. I think the way Hassan presented his argument was he went through a process of deduction. So he asked us, what possible circumstances were there regarding the universe and the existence of the universe, and he eliminated 2 and he was left with 1, and he explained that, and I think he did that very articulately. And I think the emphasis has to be on you, instead of just dismissing it out of hand, you have to offer another alternative option of why how the universe exists, rather than just dismissing and moving on.
I'm not dismissing it. I mean, I'm not dismissing it in the sense of dismissing an argument. I'm saying it's not a deduction. From the fact that two statements are false, it doesn't follow that any third statement is true. Let me take